Here.
Jason Kaufman,
Here.
Denise Malone,
Here.
Jamie Brown,
Here.
Terrence Bailey,
Here.
John Paul O'Connor, Alex Hansen,
Here.
Jessica Keller. Penny Wilson is excused. Michael Giambron,
Here.
Brian Davis,
Present.
Josh Nagel,
Ira Dangleton, alternate.
Aaron Hoffman,
Aaron, present.
Joyce Kai, Lorraine Cargill is excused. Thomas Hernandez,
Here.
Anders Vian,
Here.
Kim Delaney, Felipe Lefaso,
Here.
Christopher Marsh,
Here.
Jonathan Rainsbold,
Present.
Natalie Crowley,
Giles Rhodes, alternate for Natalie Crowley.
Mo Alturk.
Gary Dunmeyer, alternate for Mel.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, next item, modifications to the agenda. Staff, are there any modifications to the agenda?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Going on to item 1C, motion to approve minutes for June 5th, 2024. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Brian. Is there a second?
Second.
Alex, was that Alex, I think?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Item 1D, general public comments and public comments on agenda items. Instructions on how to provide public comments are included in the agenda. Staff, have there been any general comments received?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. On to 1E, comments from the chair and members of the and member comments. I don't have any comments. Are there any member comments? At this time, I'd like to invite any comments you may have on the agenda. Okay, seeing none. Next item is the TAC liaison report. I'd like to invite Nathan George up to the podium to provide an update.
Good morning, everybody. I'll give the
Oh.
update here from the desk. All right, welcome. We have a slightly less packed agenda today, so very exciting for that. Want to give you a couple of highlights. Reminder that all the details are in the liaison report, so you can get all the URLs and everything there. I'll just hit the highlights. So wanted to feature for you the TPA fiscal year 2024 annual report is available for review. So please take the opportunity to take a look at what's happened here over the past year. Got some pretty exciting updates there for you. Always a great recap of activities here at the TPA. Also wanted to highlight and feature for everybody the TPA Model Complete Streets policy that was recently updated to align with national best practices is available for review. So we wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of that. It's a really important consideration as we're talking about long range plans and the projects that we're funding across this region. So want to encourage you all to take a look at our Complete Streets policy, especially as you're considering bringing your projects to the TPA for funding. TPA is currently pursuing a renewal of the bicycle friendly business, and we have a survey available. Want to encourage everybody to take the opportunity to complete that survey. It's a pretty quick review. All of the submissions that are received at the Bike League are very helpful as they review us and consider us for recertification as bike friendly business. So I want to encourage everybody to take that opportunity and also consider applying for your cities as well. Two other highlights to touch on: the walk bike safety audit process. We've released additional information about how we select the sites for those bike walk audits. So want to encourage everybody as you're considering asking for additional audits in the region, We have additional guidelines there, so take a look at that. And if you have schools in your community that you'd like to have a walk audit, make sure that you are aware of how we're conducting that program. Two other audit updates, actually. I wanted to touch on the Trail Go local trail management grant opportunity. Trail operations and maintenance is something that is traditionally a difficult funding source, so that funding grant is available. So if that's of interest to you, take a look and forward yourself to that opportunity. And the last update that I wanted to touch on specifically is the Florida Transportation Plan. That is the state's transportation plan. It covers a lot of very important facilities across the state. They get a lot of dollars, so it's a great opportunity to see what's in their long-range plan and provide your input. So encourage everybody to take the opportunity to provide input there as well. A few more updates. We'll be talking about Vision 2050 and just we'll flash those up on the screen, but take a look at the print liaison report and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Nathan. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do any committee members have any comments or questions on the liaison report? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to action items. 2A, motion to recommend approval of the fiscal year 25 strategic plan. I'd like to invite Brian, Deputy Director, to present this item.
Make sure that thing stays on. How are you doing this morning? Good, good. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate that. Brian Risher, Deputy Director of Multimodal here at the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency, here to report on our 2024 strategic plan progress, as well as provide recommended changes to the TPA Governing Board for our 2025 strategic plan. Our strategic plan is an above and beyond effort that we provide to our constituencies. We do have our unified planning work program. That is kind of our core institutional framework that we work from. That's what we've agreed to perform with FDOT and FHWA. The strategic plans that we produce are on top of that effort. So these are efforts we are seeking to conduct in addition to the planning activities that we've already gone about committing to in fiscal year 25. Generally speaking, we try to keep the strategic plan to 3 items per goal. So we're going to run through 2024 and then we'll get into 2025. You'll see why some of them maybe are shifting around. So to start, fiscal year 2024, I was told to say this, happy new fiscal year, everyone, for what it's worth. We are really proud that we have hit many of the marks for our 2024 strategic plan. In terms of public engagement, we are really proud that we have hit 150% of our goal for presenting TPA initiatives to partner agencies and groups. So these are topics like Complete Streets, Vision Zero, grant initiatives, and mission and vision of the TPA agency. We made 29 presentations out of 20. So we are doing really well on that front. We are also increasingly seeing a lot of attention on the TPA social media pages. We have about 340,000 total users reached, when that's compared to our goal of 125,000. So we are doing very well on our social media engagement, thanks to our public relations and involvement team. Additionally, we continue to meet and exceed our goals for public input. Last year, we had a goal of, I believe, 400 comments. This year, we stretched it to 500, and we got 600 total public comments on our online maps, surveys, and other platforms that we use. So we are doing pretty good for a countywide agency that has a very futuristic goal. Sometimes the public doesn't really see us as like kind of in their immediate needs and priority to give attention to, but we're really proud that we're continuing to meet our stretched marks. For plan the systems, goal 2, this is an encompassing of our short and our long range planning task. So anything that kind of falls within the TIP time frame or within the long range transportation plan. So this is our long and our short range planning goals. For us, we have the mobility plan that we've created, which focuses on our 561 network plan. That's all of the other corridors that we haven't already studied. So for example, we've studied US 1, Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7, as well as the rail corridors. This study looks at the rest of the on-road network that we've needed to study. That study is pretty much done. The plan is drafted. We're just waiting for it to get final process from the consultants and share some of the findings with the communities along those routes before we publish the final findings. We've, as Nathan mentioned, we've updated our process for pedestrian and bicycle field safety reviews, so our audit process. We've got some refined criteria that we're looking for to try to make more projects go through our funding pipeline and to help municipalities in the county go through that process. We've recently completed 3 at the end of fiscal year 24, so we're really proud of that, and we're going to continue to build on that process. We've also started in collaboration with FDOT and Palm Beach County a speed management action plan, which utilizes our high injury network. And we're trying to come up with countermeasures and capital projects to identify how to reduce speeds on our major roadways that we plan for. Other accomplishments from Goal 3, prioritizing funding, include an update to the TPA funding programs. This is largely completed in October when we publish our annual funding guidelines. You'll see some of the suggested changes for the upcoming 2025 plan soon as we get into 2025. Otherwise, we've obviously supported all of our municipalities in our county when we are pursuing grants, not just for discretionary grants, but also for assisting municipalities in the county as they move forward for other funding programs that are available through FDOT. Implementation of projects is Goal 4. We have here to identify resurfacing projects to incorporate complete streets improvements. That one, we made it with 3. Our goal was 3. We're going to modify that slightly in 2025. Otherwise, in terms of assisting municipalities with project identification, we've assisted 6. So we're meeting a lot of our marks in terms of this strategic plan and going above and beyond our core products in the UPWP. We created a transportation demand management plan. We've conducted twice the amount of events that we were tasked with creating last year by our governing board in our strategic plan. And then we've also conducted 2 site visits, which will continue on into 2025. In terms of administering the agency, obviously, we provided a lot of trainings to our governing board and to our staff. So we're really proud of that, as well as a number of implemented new systems for our accounting department in terms of how we can get our training and succession plan moving forward. That's now created, as well as, of course, providing our strategic plan and annual report to our committees and board. Now, on to 2025, some of the fun, exciting things that we'll be looking at doing this year and working with you all on. First and foremost, instead of looking at a goal which we completely smashed last year with the users reached on social media, we want to keep that goal be up to a little bit from what we even met this year. So we're continuing to stretch our goals as much as we can to try to make sure we're making those marks. Instead of looking at updating the content, we feel like we have video and information that's pretty new and current. We want to increase the number of views of people that are actually consuming the videos on our social media and on our website, and then keeping the same amount of comments and partner initiatives for presentations and so on and so forth. For Plan the System, this is again our short and long range planning task. We have 3 actions that we are proposing, and this is to start looking at how we can promote transit-oriented communities countywide. In the past year, we have looked at all of our 561 connections and potential station areas with Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, looked at the zoning and the potential for our long-range model. We've also completed the mobility vision, which looks at the potential for short-term transit and long-term transit and multimodal recommendations for our 561. So this policy recommendations will start to evaluate how we can go about making recommendations at both city and county levels to ensure that when we provide these federal investments on transit and a multimodal, that we are getting a return and that the zoning and the land use are all supportive of the 561 network. We also heard from our TPA Executive Committee. We presented this strategic plan report to them last month about we presented originally the idea of doing a bicycle access study. We've already completed a pedestrian access study to our tri-rail stations. When we presented it to this executive committee, they recommended providing a micromobility rail access study. So this would be all encompassing of both bicycles, scooters, e-bikes, and other forms of micro mobility that are new and trending. So it'll have a little bit more of not just bicycle focus, which, we've seen studies from Miami-Dade. That's what we were originally modeling ours after. Our governing board gave us the insight to expand that scope, and we'll get that started in probably the first quarter. And then updating our Vision Zero action plan with the Safe Streets and Roads program for all in mind. We need to update the Vision Zero action plan to be a little bit more compliant and eligible if we decide to pursue grants at any time. For prioritizing funding, we'd like to create an interactive project status dashboard. We do have a lot of information on our webpage. The project status dashboard is our hopes to kind of consolidate a lot of that information into a concise place where public, agency officials and elected officials can all go and kind of see the same information and provide as much detail or kind of a refined snapshot of information as they need it. And then continuing to look at the revised list of priority projects. We've been monitoring how FDOT is encouraging MPOs to update and refine their projects list structure. And we would like to consider some of the changes that they're making, and we'll work with our committees on moving that forward when that becomes a more viable task. So for implementation of projects, we've heard from a number of our agencies that resurfacing is not the way to get complete streets improvements. So we've modified this task slightly to try to identify any other upcoming projects, not just resurfacing, that could be potential for incorporation of complete streets improvements. And we want to work with our municipalities and our county to ensure that we're making as much improvements as we can and matching our federal dollars to your local dollars whenever the feasibility is there for that type of project. We know that there are implications for using federal funding. It requires a lot of paperwork, a lot of time and staff management, but nevertheless, it can substantially enhance a project that you're already working on. We'd like to continue the other two tasks for implementation of projects in B and C. Want to continue assisting municipalities with the project innovation and applicant submittals. So for our committees, if you haven't heard yet, we are hosting the Regional Safe Street Summit. You can expect to save the date very soon. February 6th and 7th, we're going to be hosting that in downtown West Palm Beach. So while we would love to conduct 4 events on topics of interest this year, hosting the Regional Safe Street Summit does take a lot of staff time, manpower, and even support from our consultant staff. So we are going to be hosting that, and that is one of the goals of our strategic plan, is to make sure that we do that really well. We're also bringing back the mobile tours. So I'm not sure if anyone participated last year or the previous fiscal year in 23, but we went to the airport, port, Brightline, and Palm Trans facilities. So we'll be doing that again to try to familiarize staff and our elected officials with our operations of the system as it stands now. And then lastly, for administering the agency, as I said before, our goal is to try to keep it to 3. Last year, we had a pretty ambitious administrative goal, but this year we'll want to provide an annual training to our board and advisory committees, as well as continue to publish our strategic plan and annual report for goal 6. So with that, I'd like to have any questions, comments, and hopefully a motion to recommend updates for the fiscal year 25 strategic plan. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Brian. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
I just had a quick question.
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks. All right, on to committee member comments. John.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm not staff. I'm so used to be calling staff. I'm sorry. When was that summit? I missed that. That was my only question.
February 6th and 7th, we'll have a save the date, probably early August. If not by, we're hoping to do it by the governing board meeting to release a save the date, but you know, we have to make sure it's right with the branding and everything. And so there's a little bit of planning that's still going on before we release that.
Thank you.
Any other committee members have comments, questions? Kim?
So I'll move approval of the staff recommendation and a comment, which is over time, it's remarkable to see how the TPA's role has gravitated into the land use arena. So there's a long time when it was kind of, you know, a bit of the Heisman for land use versus transportation issues. And the TPA has really embraced that and led at a county level and a regional level. So compliments to the agency for doing that. And the strategic plan really illustrates that. Transit-oriented communities, bike ped access as a function of land use and complete streets is great leadership. So something to celebrate. Motion approval.
Okay, so we have a
Chair.
motion on the floor by Kim, seconded by, first, do we have a second? And then we can go for further discussion.
Second.
Seconded by Brian. Alex, discussion?
Yeah, just a question, Brian. You mentioned the micromobility rail access study.
Correct.
When is that going to be conducted? Who's conducting it? Also, I know that Tri-Rail or SFRTA conducted a somewhat similar study, I think, not too long ago for their stations. So I was just curious on that study, if you can provide a little bit more information on it.
Sure. So we have completed the pedestrian access study as an agency. There was also a study a few years ago jointly by the Regional Planning Council and the South Florida Regional Planning Council for many of the station areas. This area will look at, this study was actually recommended to us by SFRTA staff as a result of the Miami-Dade TPO's study for tri-rail stations in their county. And we took that and we brought it to our executive committee. They recommended to move it into a broader scope, obviously. We don't have who is going to be doing that study yet. We've started the collection of scopes for this project. They will largely be, I mean, more than likely our on-call consultants for this effort to look at all of our station areas. We actually have the two highest stations for bicycles and scooters in Palm Beach County. I think Lake Worth is the most popular bicycle station out of all of the tri-rail service area, and scooters at Boca Raton. So we have a large need for this, I think, in Palm Beach County. And I think I'm not as familiar with the study that you maybe just referenced, unless it's the one I'm thinking about. Maybe we can connect afterwards and talk about it with the SFRTA rep there here, but it'd be worthwhile to see what's there.
I'm sorry, and the intent is to have the study completed within this fiscal year that we just started?
That's correct.
Go ahead,
Just to
Tim.
clarify, the study that Alex is referring to, Brian, is the kind of like a high level
Mhm.
pedestrian access study that the Regional Planning Council's completed for the RTA. It is like at 20,000 feet and identifies 4 to 6 improvements at each station. The
Great.
Miami-Dade study is much more granular. It goes out to the 3-mile catchment, which is really the bike catchment, and identifies like every piece of the network that can be improved for bike ped access. So it's kind of the next level, if you will, of that fire study.
It also, if I can expand on this a little more, we haven't defined the scope for this. We anticipate it matching closely with what Miami-Dade did. But generally speaking, it's everything from route planning to user convenience at the station itself, is what that study can encompass. Our hope is to match that. We just need to make sure that that is in line with our budget for the year as well too.
Okay, any further discussion on this item? Okay, I have a motion by Kim, seconded by Brian. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion
committee
carries
and chair.
unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to item 2B, motion to recommend adoption of the fiscal year 26 through 30 list of priority projects. I'd like to invite Andrew Erler, Deputy Director of Programs, to present the item.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And again, happy state fiscal year. This is going to be the list of priority projects. And so with the new fiscal year, we just started operating under a new transportation improvement program that was seen by the committees these past 2 months and was approved by the governing board. We're now operating under that new one for 25 to 29. Now we're already working towards the new tip, and that first comes with the list of priority projects. And so the list of priority projects is our request and basically our prioritization list of federal and state funds over the next 5 years to build out the new tip. So we're currently operating under 2025. So this new one is going to be for 26 through 30. It's a new 5th year where most of the new funding goes is going to be 2030. And then to get to this point in the process, to get to this list of priority projects before you today, it starts with product development. So our long-range transportation plan has products in there. There's also specific programs that we have through state roads, local initiatives, and transportation alternatives that has annual calls for projects. Those all get submitted by locals or come from the cost feasible plan. They're reviewed for feasibility and they try to get work program ready. Those are then submitted into this list of priority projects. Once this list of priority projects is approved by the governing board, it's sent to FDOT. They're then building out their new work program statewide for the year. And in that, they are updating cost estimates, so balancing the current work program. And then they're adding in the new priorities based on funding availability. And so with that list, this year, that's going to come to the TPA, and you all be able to see that review this year for the draft tentative work program in December. With that list, we provide our comments on that, and then they build a final work program, which we then build a tip off of. And so it's a long process that takes a year to accomplish to get to that new tip, which is going to be June of next year. And so we're only talking about the Transportation Improvement Program sections here related to the TPA priorities. So in the backup, you're going to see that executive summary. It's going to have the major products and state roads, the local initiatives, the transportation alternatives, and there's also a shared use network trail section. And that's the only ones in the backup. The other ones are in the tip, but since we're only putting forward the TPA priorities, that's what you see in this list. And I'm going to go into more detail for bigger changes that we've seen in the list. There's only a few, so I'm not going to talk about the whole list altogether. So if the products already exist in the list last time around and there's no change to them, they're just continuing forward as they've been presented before. So I'm really focusing on highlights that we felt would be new for you all to see. So our three funding programs, major products, local initiatives, and transportation alternatives. Those major products are typically on state roads. They typically use state funding sources because that's where the state funds need to be used. Then we have local initiatives, which is predominantly going to be federal funds. So federal aid eligible network, it furthers TPA mission and vision and uses federal funds. And then we have transportation alternatives, which is a smaller pot of money for non-motorized transportation, also uses federal funds. And that could be used on or off the federal aid system. And so the first section is major projects. All the ones in there, there's major products, large products in there that are still moving forward. A lot of those are fully funded at the top of the list with Atlantic, State Road 7, et cetera. Some updates for you all on three products. The first one, Tri-Rail extension on the FEC corridor. So this is one, you're not going to see too much of a funding update in this list, but there is funds that are starting upcoming in this fiscal year 25 for studies, and that's going to occur in Broward and Palm Beach. And so we discussed this a little bit last month. FDOT's preliminary planning, doing these preliminary planning studies, and there's still operations and maintenance required for these corridors, but we're involved in collaborating with them and ensuring that FDOT is working with us on the scope along with Tri-Rail. And with that, they're looking to get more specifics on locations and cost estimates. So our quest really is to ensure close coordination with you all, with the governing board and staff. And this is involving the extension on the FEC corridor headed towards Jupiter. Next is a product that was presented last month, seen by you all, the CAC, and then the board. So there is a TPA product for a US 27 connector from US 27 to State Road 715. Presented last month was a preliminary study to look at different alignments, and what the importance of this was for AFTOT to figure out if there's any fatal flaws with any of these alignments. They're still finishing up this study. They're going to do a little bit more rounds of outreach to the local municipalities out there. But with this, the next phase would be that product development environmental phase, PD&E. And so the request is to fund the PD&E for this next part of this project. So they'll take these alignments, they'll probably bring it down to either two main alignments and study those for the PD&E. And then the last update is a push to try to accelerate another product that's a congested corridor within Palm Beach County. And this is just east of I-95. It's Indiantown Road at Central Boulevard. It's sort of in the Island Way to Central Boulevard area in the Jupiter municipality. And so there's already PD&E programmed, and it's looking to try to accelerate the PD&E phase. Right now, AFDOT has noticed or mentioned to us that it theoretically potentially could be fiscal year 27. It's currently 28. So that'd be some acceleration. And so that's what our request is, to try to accelerate this. There was a preliminary study on this corridor from AFDOT And that was, had a recommendation for a partial displaced left turn. So that's gonna be part of what this PD&E would analyze in more detail among some other, congestion and safety improvements, for this. So again, that's just another PD&E that's seeking acceleration. Then there's the local initiatives list. I don't have that slide up here because there's no change to that list. Those are all ones where we didn't have an open application process this last round because we had a backlog of products to fund there. So we're seeking to still fund those ones that are unfunded. So there's about 5 or 6 of those from 2023 cycle we're looking to fund. And then new products for transportation alternatives. So we did have this application cycle and we had some submittals, 3 submittals for 24-1 through 3. And then we have one additional product since there looks like there may be funds, but came from the local initiatives list. And this is for Palm Tran. This is Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard from Executive Center Drive to Australian with some transit stop improvements and connectivity. So these are new products submitted in the plan for the transportation alternatives list. And those are really the updates I have for you. I can answer any questions related to these or other ones in the list.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Steph, are there any public comments on this item? Okay, do any committee members have any comments on this item? Jason?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. For the local initiatives projects, I recall last year, once it went to DOT, some of the projects were shifted around. So is that still subject to DOT's programming?
Well, that's sort of broad statement. It really depends. So the local initiatives program, they are federal funds to prioritize. So in the end, it's our support of them. So like, they're not the ones shifting around to be with the prioritization of the CPA. There has been historically products that we have shifted from LI to TA if they would meet the eligibility there and they're a smaller scale of a project. Is that what you're referring to?
No, I
or-
remember last year the money was moved to a
Sure.
larger project for DOT. So now you're showing funds in future years for some of these projects. Are we able now to use those dates for planning purposes, or they're still subject to DOT?
Understood. Yes. So what you're mentioning historically there is this last round, or maybe it's been 2 in a row, we've had larger scale priorities in that major list that were such large costs that we didn't have enough funds to fully fund it with state funds. And so those funds that would typically be used for local initiatives went to those major products. In this list, yes, I think we expect to see these local initiatives programmed projects funded this year. Some of the larger, there's still a lot of major needs on this major products list coming up, a few with US 1 projects, and there's some intersection projects countywide that still need some large funding amounts. But the larger portions of Atlantic Avenue, which is fully funded, and State Road 7 fully funded already, those are ones that ate up a lot of that funds before. So I expect us to see things being programmed in local initiatives, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alex?
Yes, the list or this includes as part of the major projects includes State Road 7 extension and widening. So again, consistent with the city's longstanding position of opposing these 2 projects, I'm going to have to vote against the item in front of us.
Okay. Thomas?
So just wanted to ask, for the Tri-Rail piece, I know it's always that there's a commitment for local funding that are needed. Just was curious if somebody from staff could get with maybe even the members of what that local funding piece would be for each of those easy municipalities. Because I have to ultimately work with our finance department, work with town council members as well as the town manager to authorize anything, and have it work through some of our through our channels to make sure that that's something that they want to support. And that they can prioritize and program. So if it's possible, if somebody could, provide that information, it'd be helpful.
Sure. Sure. And I think, and just to, talk a little more on that with the operations and maintenance portion of that. For the most part, we can find the capital costs associated with these things. There's, a lot of federal and state grants out there for that. And then the maintenance and operations, some of that will be handled by federal and state funds. And it's really that local piece that's the tough part. Hopefully though, we have done TPA studies on the cost to operate Tri-Rail extending north and throughout the entire county. And so this will go a little bit more in detail about capital costs and then also ongoing operations and maintenance. And so I guess what you're asking or stating there is, what would theoretically, how much do we need to make up that gap of a local funding commitment for operations and maintenance? Whether that comes from a local municipality or some larger scale local funding resource.
Kim?
So, so on the local funding commitment.
Can you, Amy, make sure your mic's on there? Thank you.
So on the local funding commitment, Thomas, the conversation's really gravitated towards the approval of a 1 cent sales tax, which would happen through referendum. So the TPA can't really take the direct role in that as a public agency, but there are groups that are assembled that are advocating for that because that's really the only way to make up that gap meaningfully. So, there's more to follow on that. It's the right question to ask, and that's why it's been such a slow conversation in Palm Beach County because Miami-Dade and Broward have gotten past that point and they have local dedicated funding, but we don't have that in Palm Beach County. So we're kind of out of the game from a federal standpoint until we can get that established. So that's really how that I think gets filled in because the burden on local governments would be pretty significant to pay for the O&M. So it's the right question to ask. There's a role for the TPA to play in that, but it's not a direct one. So it's a little bit distanced because of the nature of referenda.
Okay, thanks. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion. Can I have a motion? So moved by Brian. Any second?
1 second.
Thank you. Seconded by Jonathan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, show that record reflects Alex with the nay. Okay, on to item 3A, roadway functional classification update. I'd like to invite Raja from FDOT to present this item, please.
Let me start again. Good morning, Madam Chair and the committee members. My name is Rajendran Shanmugam. You can call me Raj if it's difficult to pronounce Rajendran. I'm here to present to you the process that we are going through doing the functional classification. This happens once every 10 years after the publication of the census data. It happened before in 2010 census data, and the functional classifications were defined in 2014. It doesn't mean you don't have any leeway to make changes in between, but the majority of the changes happens at the beginning. So now we are in the 2020 cycle of the census data, and we have gone through the urban boundary designation. If you all remember before, I'm coming in front of this committee and presenting to you the urban boundary. And now it's the next step from that, which is the defining the functional classification. So there you go. There go too much. So as the word stands, functional classification, it describes the function of the roadway, its characteristics, and the purpose of the roadway. That's the intent of giving a functional classification. Of course, you all know the local street where you live, that when you come out of your driveway, that's your local street. Then eventually you get to go through a collector, an arterial, then you end up with a freeway if you're going to be using the freeway. So there are hierarchy in the road system. Why is it important? Why do we have to give the functional classification? Well, two main purposes. One is funding. You get the federal funding if you're within the functionally classified roadway. And also for the analysis purposes, different functions of the roadway have different thresholds when it comes to doing the analysis, such as the capacity, the speed limit, things like that is defined by the functional characteristics of the roadway. You got it, okay. Thank you. So like I mentioned before, the federal aid eligibility is determined by the functional classification. Now, a lot of people get excited over this saying, okay, we're going to lose federal aid eligibility. The only functional roadways that do not receive federal aid are the local streets or the private streets and the rural minor collectors. Rest of the roadways would receive the federal funds. Those designated roadways also receive the emergency funds when there's a disaster happens. When there are emergency needs are required, those roadways receive the emergency funds as well. So the roles that we have, the department's role is to perform an initial review of the roadways that we currently exist with the functional classification and come up with a functional class. We will have to receive feedback from the cities and the counties to make sure that what we came up with consistent with what the cities and the counties like to have. Things will change. I know for sure it will change during that process. Following that, we'll be bringing back the plan to this board for an approval. From there, it will be taken up to the TPA's approval. From there, it will go to the central office and the FHWA for their approval. There are a lot of information used to determine what functional class a roadway falls in. Fortunately, we already classified almost all of the roadways in certain functional classification, but that was done 10 years ago. Things have changed. So we take another look at it, information such as the density of the roadway, meaning that how much intersections, signalized intersection, unsignalized intersection, the amount of traffic on that roadway, the type of traffic generators that roadway is trying to serve. So these are all factors that go into determining what the functional classification is or changing the functional classification from what it was before to what it should be now. Of course, from everything that I went through right now, there is a certain amount of subjectiveness involved in it. It's easy to say local street that's in front of my home or freeway. That's the, turnpike or I-95, that's a freeway. Everything in between, subject to opinion. And people saying, okay, no, I think this should be this function or that function. We are willing to listen to those changes that the local municipalities would be making to us. However, we are going to go by the guidance that we have been given by the Federal Highway Administration, and we would come to a resolution, what we should use it. What we don't want to do is send it up to the Federal Highway Administration, then it coming back to us, then going through the whole process again. So we're going to vet it as much as possible so that when we get it to the federal highway, we don't have to redo this again. This is planning 101, as we plan for roadways, the lower on the hierarchy is the roadways that provide access, such as I keep mentioning the local streets that provide access to the homes. Then you have the higher mobility, such as arterials in Palm Beach. State Road 80 is a major arterial. I-95, Turnpike, these are all major principal arterials in Palm Beach County. And this is the fuzzy table that I call it. For each classification, you have the different characteristics that, low, high, medium, access points. For example, principal arterial, you will have very few access points. Whereas on a local street, you will have many access points. On the other end, principal arterials may have a longer distance of travel. A local street will be a very shorter distance. Then in between, there's a whole number of different things that we have to look through in order to determine where it fits in. The functional classification process, we had to go through the 3 steps. The first step is a continuation of what we did before, which is the urban boundary designation. Purely looking at from an changing the urban boundary, expanding or contracting the urban boundary, what did that do to our functional classification? Remember, functional classification starts with urban or rural. Is it urban arterial, rural arterial, urban collector, rural collector? So once we change that urban boundary designation, that connotation also changes. So that's the first step that we do, which we have done already, and figure out how many of the roadways have changed from urban to rural or rural to urban. The second step that we go through is what I described earlier, going through all these different factors that we have, different characteristics of the roadways that we have to come up with what the appropriate functional classification is, which we have taken our first step and will be taken to the local municipalities to present to them and get feedback. I don't want to say taken to the local municipalities. We'll be gathering feedback from the local municipalities to go to the next step. The third step is to look at the local roads. Now, remember in the beginning, I showed the local roads and the rural minor arterials do not receive federal funds. This is an opportunity where the local roads can be bumped up to an urban minor arterial, so therefore it can receive the federal funds. If it's bumped up to a rural minor arterial, it still would not receive any funding, any federal funding, I should say. So the first step I was describing first, changing the urban area boundary, right? And you can see what's in blue was the 2010, which was the previous urban area boundary. 2020 is what I presented when I came here last time, showing that what we have done with the urban area boundary. And you can see those little areas that are sticking out. Those are the expanded areas in Palm Beach County that have fallen within the urban area boundary. There are a couple of places that do fall out of the urban area boundary. And we have gone through that process of defining which is urban area and which is not urban area. It's already been sent up to FHWA. Therefore, we're not going to go back and relitigate, what is urban and what's rural. We are at the point of using that information that we have and figuring out how much of the roadways that are within the added urban area need to be changed the connotation of from rural to urban or urban to rural. So that's what this first step is. And what you see on this table, it's a summary of just doing that one step, what had changed. And I have highlighted the Palm Beach portion of the District 4, and you can see there are 12.5 miles of roadways have changed from either rural to urban or urban to rural. Okay, and they're broken down into different categories: interstate, expressway, so on and so forth. It's another way of presenting that same data. What you see here is the rural to urban, 4.274 miles, urban to rural, 8.226 miles. This is purely based on the map shrinking or expanding from what it was before. That's all it is. So we also put the same data in a different format to add how much was added to the federal aid eligibility. That's 0.598 miles. Removed, which is 2.012 miles. And no changes. No changes because of the change in the urban boundary designation. There's no change happened to it. It's still the same. Okay, it might be a little confusing, but we'll come back and answer that question if you have any question on that, but I'll reserve that question for now. So to give you an idea of these different categories, how we figure out the functional classification, these tables would help a little more. So you see on the middle roadway purpose, there are 7 purposes that are listed. So in order for a roadway to be a principal arterial, you must have more than 2 criteria met. So that's what we went through, an exercise trying to figure out. So in this map, you can see I-95 is a principal arterial. Turnpike is a principal arterial. State Road 80 is a principal arterial. This is an example that I'm showing just within the capture of the map that we have. Then in order for it to be in a minor arterial category, you must meet at least 1. And that's what you see. The Haverhill Road is an example of a minor arterial. Then again, for the major collectors, you need to meet more than 1 of those roadway purposes. Minor collectors, you need to meet 1 of those purposes. Then the rest falls under the local streets. So what had happened we are looking at this information saying, okay, what changes can we make? And this is what resulted out of it. To give some sense out of this table, let me take that first number, 10.451. What that means is that 10.451 miles of roadway moved from rural principal arterial to rural minor arterial. Let me pick another one. Let's take the 7.215 that you see in there. It moved from urban principal arterial to urban minor arterial. So in Palm Beach County, this table is specifically for Palm Beach County, going through the 2 exercises that we have, the urban boundary designation changes and the characteristics of the roadway have changed 45.686 miles from what it was before to what it is now. Then, of course, the local streets. We went through different local streets and looked at different characteristics of those local streets. And I pointed out what are the characteristics that you have to meet in order for it to be a collector. So we have identified, here's a couple of examples that you see here that have moved up to the category of minor collectors. And this is the summary of only the local streets. Palm Beach had the largest jump from local streets to minor collectors, urban minor collectors. 87.342 miles of of all the roadways that were bumped up in District 4. Palm Beach had almost more than half of the roadways that were bumped up. I don't want to bore you all with this chart. I'm just going to browse through this. These are the process we're going through. We want to have this completed by end of this year, but our central office came and said, no, we need this by August. We said, no, it's not going to happen in August. Our MPO, TPO partners, they go on vacation. They don't have meetings in August and July and sometimes in September. Therefore, we have told them it's not going to happen in August, but we are trying to get this done by October. I think, we will be there. We're going to have our first workshop for Palm Beach and Broward County at the district office on July 22nd. July 20, that's my consultant support I have in the back here. July 22nd, I'm sorry. July 22nd from 9 a.m. to noon at the district office, Manatee Conference Room. You will be receiving an invitation unless you already received that invitation. No? Yes? Yep. So they were all sent out. So we're asking all of you to show up. Not all of you, but agencies to show up and provide your feedback. This is the first opportunity or the best opportunity that you have to raise your concern. I know when I came for my Urban boundary designation, everybody's just waiting for functional classification. When is that going to happen? When is that going to happen? Well, it's happening. So mark your calendars. July 22nd is the date to come and give your feedback. And we will be taking a look at it and we'll come back to you if it's something that we can do or we cannot do it and let you know what can be done. Then, of course, we'll be bringing back to the TAC after we finish with the whole thing to get the tax approval for this. So let's see, yeah, the finish line will be in April 2025, but that's a long way away. But what's immediate deadline we have is by October. We want to get the functional classification completed and send it up to the board, TAP. I'm sorry, TPA board, and then send it up to the Federal Highway Administration. So what's pending? Well, we still have to do coordination with our District 1 to the west, District 5 to the north, and District 6 to the south, because they are our contiguous districts. We want to make sure anything that we are doing that's consistent with what they are coming up with. Now, for Palm Beach County, what's critical is the District 1. Anything that's going on in District 1, we need to make sure that there's a seamless process, a seamless designation of roadways between the two districts. We are going to be doing the coordination with the counties and municipalities, which is very important. We want to make sure that you send the best representative that you have to that meeting that we have on the 22nd of July, so that you can voice your concern or bring in your needs to be heard and documented, and for us to take a look at it. Like the bullet says, we will be implementing appropriate adjustments and obtain acceptance. So this is not going to be one-way process. You know, we like to get feedback from you. We're going to give you, can it be done or cannot be done? Then we will have to come to a consensus. What is the best thing to do with this? It doesn't mean that we're going to hold our ground and say, no, this is the only way. We would give our guidance saying that this is the best way to go forward for the Federal Highway Administration to accept it. Hopefully, we will have a cordial process like we had with the urban boundary. You know, everybody was happy with what we came up with. We did have some changes that we incorporated and sent it up to FHWA, and it's in the process of being approved. Yeah, I think I spoke through all this. We have to get the signatures of the TPA before we send it out to FHWA. Now, although we will send it to FHWA as a draft, just to make sure that they're okay with it, we don't want to wait till the last minute, having the signatures from the TPA, then send it up to FHWA. Then we will make our changes to the RCI, roadway characteristics inventory. That's part of our internal process, and that will bring us to the end. So we are not going to get into any details about any specific roadway at this meeting. This is an informational meeting, informational presentation to let you know what the process is. We do want to get your feedback at the July 22nd meeting. And we will go through specific segments of roadway. In fact, there are tables that were sent out to each municipalities showing you within your municipalities what the changes have happened, rather than the summary that I showed you here. We would like you to take a very close look at that. Come back to the July 22nd meeting and we'll have a discussion. Try to figure out what is the best functional classification to be assigned if we disagree. From there, we'll bring it back to the TAC for your approval. Well, with that, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any committee members have comments? I see Alex's hand is up, or Ard.
Yeah, one of the questions that I have is Andrew Euler from the TPA shared some documents with the committee members in preparation for this meeting. That included a map that I guess was recently prepared. Is that, let's call it the draft map?
Correct.
That, so if that is the case, would it be possible to have that map highlighted indicating what the changes are in relation to the currently adopted map. That way, the review would be easier so we can see what is different from the map, from the existing map. Because it's difficult, otherwise we may be talking again hundreds of roads for some municipalities like us, and it'll be more useful to see what has changed from the previous map. So that is one comment question. The second one is the invitations for the July 22nd meeting. Who were they sent to? Because again, some municipalities, also large municipalities, may be sent to somebody, and then that information is not properly disseminated to the ones who actually need to attend the meeting. The third item is, I know you also have, let's call it a mid-cycle adjustments sometimes. And we learned that kind of the hard way here in West Palm Beach, because we were doing some updates to our comprehensive plan as part of the evaluation and appraisal review. That happened over the last couple of years. We also needed to adopt the functional classification map in our comp plan. We went to the website and we relied on the map that was adopted 10 years ago. And then kind of at the last minute, we learned that there had been some changes to that map that had happened a couple of years ago that affected Southern Boulevard and Okeechobee Boulevard. And we had not been notified of those changes. So we had to kind of at the last minute update the updates to the map that were already ongoing. So for future, let's say mid-cycle adjustments, if you can explain how that process also happens and how the communication with the affected municipalities takes place, because it doesn't seem that it took place with West Palm Beach when those changes to Southern Boulevard and Okeechobee within the boundaries of West Palm Beach took place a few years ago.
Okay, Alan, I think you had many questions in there. So we're going to go through one at a time. The first question, of course, I'm going to have my consultant answer that. If you say your name and.
Hi, I'm Tina McKinney. How's everyone doing? So in the email that was forwarded from Andrew, there was a link included for an ArcGIS online map. And the map's very easy to, I tried to make it very easy to use. So in it, it has, when you open the map, it has 3 different files for the functional class. One is existing, means that we had no changes to it, unless it was like at the boundary, maybe a hair, but no changes to it that are relevant. And then another one that is for the existing roads that have had changes. So if we make a recommendation to change, we'll say Southern Boulevard from the interstate going to where it ends being US 98, it would be in there and you would see by turning your layers on and off by check marking. And if you're not familiar, you can contact me. I'd be glad to help. I sent a how to do it document with the link. But so you would be able to turn on and off those 3 different layers. And the last layer is the ones that are the locals, the 84 miles that were referenced. So you could turn on that layer and you would be able to see all the ones that are new being recommended to be added to the urban minor collector group.
Great, thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, I remember some PDF maps that I saw, but I guess.
Yeah, I did send PDFs, but if anybody wants a map for a specific city, I'm Tina at Caltrans Group. My fingerprints are all over the emails somewhere. Just holler at me and I'll be glad to send you one.
All right, so I believe that the first question, so the answer to the first question, there is a GIS map. Because I do remember we are discussing this, wanting to make it easier for the reviewer. So we said it's better to put it in a GIS map rather than giving PDF maps to each one of them. So I'm old school as well. I don't look for GIS. Soon as I look at it, PDF, I say, yeah, I have PDF. But I need to train my mind to say, no, look at the GIS maps, it's in there. Your second question, Alan, was regarding the
Invitation, who we went to.
So initially, when we started the urban boundary designation, we compiled a list of people should be sent out to. And of course, we went back and forth. We had made changes, because there are people we thought were changed. Now we know that may have changed as well. So this time around, we send it back to the same people that we had in our list, which is the updated list. We also try to update it based on our knowledge of, what, if there are any changes. Then again, we cannot know every single changes that have happened at every single municipalities. I think this is a great forum for you all to check back and see who received it. It's the same people who received the urban boundary designation are the one we send it back to. If they have changed, there should be someone who have received it. We did have alternatives that we send it to as well. So it's not just the one person, we had a backup to send it to. So please, check with your staff and find out if they received it, if they forwarded that to the right person so that you have it. Sure.
To go along with that, if you receive the email from Andrew, if he forwarded it to you with the attachments, the list of contacts that we had sent it to for in the different cities in the county were included in it. So if he sees anything or you're aware of anything, that list has been shared. But if someone wants me to send it to you, I'd be more than happy to push it to the chair or the persons that disseminate information here.
Good morning. I'm Janelle Liu. I'm a consultant for DOT, also working in this process. So basically what we did is when we sent out the emails to a municipality, this list was gathered back at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. So yeah, we understand that it could be outdated. And when we send this out, we copy the TPA. So it would be good if you guys can help us out, probably gather the proper staff to be able to reach out to the ones that we need to. But one thing I wanted to point it out too is that the workshop is not necessarily mandatory. The workshop is optional. And if you can start looking at those maps and if you can start sending us information, we can start looking at those information and see if we can implement something. So when it comes to the workshop, which is 2 weeks from now, we can have more things to discuss, but it's not necessarily a mandatory meeting. So it's something optional that you want to discuss. If you agree with the changes that we're proposing, definitely you can send us an email back and let us know we agree with the changes, or if you don't have any roads that are being impacted and you don't believe anything needs to be done, you can also send us an email and let us know that you're okay with the existing functional classification within your jurisdiction.
Thank you. I know why we have a consultant supporting us because.
Sorry. So one thing that we are, our goal is to come back to you in September for your September meeting for approval. As Raj mentioned, we have a very tight schedule that was actually forced to us a month ago. And we thought we had until the end of the year, but we don't have until the end of the year so hopefully we can finalize this prior to that. And we wish to come back to you for approval at your September meeting, on board also in September, if possible.
So I think that was your third question that's answered, Alan, right? You're asking about the.
Second one, the third one was the mid-cycle adjustment and the process for that, which I understand may happen later on, but
Right.
I just want to make sure that the municipalities affected are included in that process. That didn't seem to be the case when that last adjustment happened.
Can you? Please. So this is the first time I'm doing the functional classification and urban boundary, although I am working in 38 years. First time I've been asked to do something like this, but Tina been working on this for many, many years. Tina is a former FDOT employee from our central office, and that's why we, gladly accepted the consultant to work with us. So can you answer this question about the mid-cycle changes?
Yeah. So, Janelle and I were even just mentioning that to each other, that as part of the review of the mid-cycle, they're supposed to include providing information to the entities for which it traverses. So if it goes through your city or your county, you're supposed to be involved in that. So we'll do a double check. Now, we mentioned already that each agency can have multiple people responsible for different things. So you can also go to the DOT Atlas website and you can see what their current functional classification is at any given time.
And that's what we did. That's the process that we
Okay.
followed. And the map that was in the website for the functional classification was the map that was adopted 10 years ago. And so we used that as our base. And then it wasn't until we actually tried to get GIS files for that map that we reached out to the TPA, and then the TPA shared the functional classification layer. That's when we discovered that there were discrepancies between the map that was on the FDOT page and the most recent one.
I know exactly what you're talking about. So when I say the Atlas, that's an ArcGIS online that gets updated on a regular basis. And also from the Transportation Data Analytics Office, they have ArcGIS online shapefiles that get updated every week. So that's the mechanism that I use. I've used this data. I was the person that reported it to Federal Highway for the entire state. So I had to really work hard to make sure what I gave them was right. Trust me, that drove me crazy. But I go to the shape files.
So we do apologize, Alan, if things have left out and you guys were left out of the process of, making the changes, but that's completely our intent, making sure that the local municipalities are involved in, if there are changes, they're involved in it. And I don't know, I can't speak for what had happened in the past, but for sure, while I'm here, we'll make sure that that'll be taken care of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think passing it through the TPA too will be helpful as well.
Sure, we'll be there.
Are there any other comments, any further discussion? Okay, thank you for the presentation. On to item 3B, Vision 2050 Project Funding Preview. Staff would like to invite Nathan George, Long Range Transportation Plan Coordinator, to present this item, please.
All right, good morning, everybody. Morning again, I should say. Lift the air in the room and talk about something that's a little lighter topic, finances. Everybody ready to go through your accounting history? We're going to talk about an update, the project funding preview. So I would love to be here today talking with you about our draft cost feasible plan, but I don't have it to present. So I want everybody to be aware, mark your calendars mentally to keep an eye out for an email that you'll be seeing about an upcoming funding cost feasible plan draft. We're going to have to schedule a special meeting for that in August. The next time this group meets, you'll be looking at a draft Vision 2050 document. So want to give you that as a preview, but the presentation today is really to focus on the framework that's going to, the framework of how we're going to put all of those dollars into this plan. So we're going to talk about TPA prioritization, the project selection and funding process. So we won't talk about those specific projects, but we'll talk about the nature of those projects. And then we'll talk about a bit implementation and LRTP maintenance considerations. A major focus of mine has been how do we keep this document up to date over its life cycle. A reminder of our timeline, we're in summer working through the scenario development, developing that draft cost feasible plan. We've started working on the draft document itself, working towards the December adoption of this document. Just a quick reminder, the TPA, our core functions are to plan the transportation system and to prioritize funding. And we're mostly here focused on how we prioritize funding. But it's you, our municipalities, and our local transportation providers who actually commit those projects and do them. Projects is where our mission in that corner of the room meets our vision in this corner of the room. It's where we're actually delivering through funding of projects that safe, efficient transportation network. I wanted to highlight for everybody, I thought it was a really great graphic. I pulled this from the multimodal level of service or quality level of service document that FDOT put together. Level of service for vehicles, which traditionally is how we prioritize projects. And that graphic looks very old in 1970s, but we're really focused on a multimodal, how people walk and bike So projects need to have consideration for all modes, and it's tied to our goals and objectives. So I'm going to provide for you a little juxtaposition today, how things were done in 2045, how we're going to change in 2050, and what that's going to mean when you see how our draft cost feasible plan comes together. So you're going to see some really important, call it framework, and I want to hear your input because that's going to help us as we start applying dollars. So in 2045, you saw really 3 core areas where the TPA prioritized funding. So we had enhanced transit, which was our not fully cost feasible studies of our 561 corridors, the enhanced north, south, and east-west corridors that will receive those light rail, BRT, whatever that mode may be, but really it could only be funded to a study, and then maybe some interim improvements along certain corridors. The next area that we had was our annual funding programs. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. You heard Andrew talk about that as he was talking through the LOPP presentation. But that was not committed, call it a set aside. We're going to talk about that, what that means in just a minute, but our state road modifications, local initiatives, those programs are set asides in the 2045 plan. And then we went through the annual call that I'll talk about in just a moment. TA is going to remain that annual funding program because that's not something we're going to commit in this document. And then we had legacy major projects. So this was the major roads that Andrew was talking about when he talked about the TIP, widening Atlantic, completion of State Route 7, despite the fact that that raises objection. Those were the kinds of projects that were largely itemized individually in this plan. So let's talk about those annual funding programs. The administration of annual funding programs was really a set aside where we had dollars in the LRTP, and then we went to you each year and said, what would you like us to fund out of these dollars? The challenge with how that process works was that, as Andrew mentioned, we had additional projects that get added. They exceeded the amount of funding that we had each year. So we have this 2045 cost feasible plan, a list of projects. Then we prioritize those projects based on what's listed in the plan. And we're drawing from this annual call, we exceeded our cost feasible. We have more projects that are prioritized than we had funding. So that's something that we're looking to correct in this cycle. You have not seen us ask for additional local initiatives or state road modifications because we have more in our LOPP than we have funding to achieve. And ultimately, those are our desires as we send that LOPP up to FDOT so they can program the dollars. So this is something that we're looking to correct and alter how we introduce new projects into the plan. 2050 approach. So what's a major shift, a pivot that we're going to take? And part of that is prioritizing planning. I want to highlight one specific area that I want to, I've been really trying to focus on how we approach projects, and that's project vetting versus planning of projects. So when we think about vetting, that's really assessing what items are eligible as you come to us and say, I want to do this project, what's eligible, and the technical feasibility of it is considered, but not at the level. If we completed a full planning study, we knew that a pole is going to be in the middle of a street when that project's completed. If I saw this on one of my job sites and there's complete asphalt and a curb next to it, that's a problem. So getting back to the basics, focusing on planning is a major area that we can avoid those sorts of pitfalls from becoming a challenge that causes a project to be delayed, canceled. That's our agency is here to fund projects. We don't deliver them, but it's our goal that that funding is to committed projects that get completed. And so we're going to commit to successful planning of projects before those projects are recognized as a fully funded project. So this is an example of what the cost feasible table for each project is going to look like in the plan. And actually, projects that aren't even cost feasible will look something like this. They may just be blank because we don't have cost values for a project that is a local desire, and we don't have the time to go through 1,000 projects and establish costs. So for projects that we had put forward in candidate status is what we're calling them right now. If a project would be funded as a study, it will be reflected in the cost feasible plan, PD&E dollars. All of our additional costs, the PE right away and construction would be rolled out to the final time band and then reported as an unfunded need. So that gives you a clear indication. We commit to complete this study. This is how much the whole project's going to cost, so full transparency. And then after that study is complete, the agency that's responsible for delivering that project, the project sponsor, will come to the TPA, present to the board, like you've heard presentations before about a project that's going through PD&E. That is the time when FDOT expects a project to be recorded in the long-range transportation plan. And then with that being amended into the long-range transportation plan, the full funding would be recognized as a committed project. Any projects that don't require that, really exhaustive planning process could certainly be committed. That's examples like technology, doesn't require planning, but any projects that are going to require support, understanding of what the feasibility implications are, those projects do require study. We've made a preliminary assessment to determine what those needs will be, so we can identify projects that really need to be studied before they're fully funded. Project types. This is where I think a lot of folks in the room are going to have interest in providing input, especially once we get into the draft cost feasible table. First is our committed projects, and we have the TIP, we have the local priorities, anything that's in that local initiatives or state road modification and remains unfunded. Those are still committed priorities. So we're basically, this has been a very exhaustive reconciliation process to get our LOPP and our long-range transportation plan to be consistent. So moving forward, all of those priorities are reflected in the document. And so we understand that over commitment that we made in the LOPP, we now have that all recorded in this document. Illustrative, let me back up for a second. Committed projects, that will be prioritized studies or prioritized committed projects. So this is our opportunity from a flexibility perspective. It allows the TPA to incorporate your projects, not completely funded, just funded to a study phase. If the study is successful, those projects can be amended in and draw down on those set aside funds that are in the LI or SRM funding section of the table. So it gives us a much easier way to account for the funds as they're being expended. Illustrative projects is an example where we have a prioritized project and we either run out of funds as we're going through the draft cost feasible, so we can't fully commit those projects, or it could be projects that we support but would not fund. So those could be like a discretionary trail project is a good example of what you'll see as illustrative. Could also be things like FDOT's maintenance, so where they're maintaining bridge structures. That's something easy for us to say, of course, the TPA supports that, but we'll still expect things like multimodal bridge replacement, that sort of thing. Local desires is all the projects that didn't score high enough to be brought forward for consideration. Doesn't mean they go away. I'll walk through that in just a second. They're referenced but not supported, allows us to reconsider them in the future. It allows us to capture them if there's a surtax, and then you can locally fund those. But it's a list that's not TPA supported, at least at the adoption of this plan. And we'll walk through that a little bit more. As we've worked through this process, I've continued to build out a flow chart. I hate flow charts. I'm not an engineer, but I do want to highlight for everybody how this process all works together, because you've heard about some of these major sort of items that we have at TPA that guide the work that we do. So I want to make sure everybody understands how this process works. So in the red box on the left side of the screen, that's the local project submissions, the genesis of all the projects that go into the long range plan. We make an assessment based on what we received of what is a local desire, things that would be ineligible, things that may not score as well, and leave those in the local desires for transparency. Every one of those will be recorded. We're to over 1,000 1,000 total project records in our database. And then the projects that scored well, the things that we think we can support, those have been brought forward as candidates. It might be candidate studies, but they're candidate projects that we're going to consider for funding. We have been going through and pulling some of the local desires out of that status, put some into illustrative, put some into candidate status. So that's still a process that's ongoing. Work through the public and stakeholder input process. So this is where we're talking with your communities. We've been out to 6 different meetings over the last 3 weeks. So that's been a pretty exhaustive process, but we want to hear from folks. What do they support? What do they not support? Especially if projects aren't supported, that's where we might run into, we committed funding and the project gets delayed or canceled. So that process informs getting projects into the Vision 2050, which is where we are right now. And then from that project list, when we come to you next month with the draft cost feasible, we'll either commit those projects as studies or as fully funded. Maybe we'll have illustrative. Some projects that are under consideration may revert back to local desires status. And that's our list that we go to And we develop that list of priorities and submit it to FDOT so they can consider those for funding. So it's important to remember the set aside doesn't mean that we have committed those dollars. It's not a financial auditable, traceable record. It's still a priority. It still has to go through that separate process where we pass those through to FDOT and they work through the work program process to allocate the dollars. Just a quick reminder on the prioritization side, because this is where I think a lot of folks are going to want to understand why their project was not included and understand how the TPA can consider those. So if it's in the cost feasible plan, it is something that TPA supports. If it's, you're going to see some projects that maybe aren't in that list just because they need to go through a discretionary sort of exercise. They need to be supported by planning. So that's why they are considered a local desire. They're referenced and not currently supported. But there are ways that those projects can be brought forward and supported. You can come back after adoption. We simply don't have time to go through the 470 was at my last count, the number of local desire records that we have. We don't have time to vet 470. We will all be in this room until the end of the year if we do that. But after adoption, you can come back and demonstrate alignment with TPA's goals with that project. You can some of the projects may require discretionary funding, so they may be really well suited to TA, and I'm just simply saying they're a local desire until you go through that TA process or similar grant application through like the Fed. Or you may do that successful planning process that demonstrates all the needs you acquire right away. You have funding set aside for relocating utilities, whatever it may be. There are ways that local projects, your local priorities can be strengthened and improved to get them into the plan. We just won't have the time to do that between now and December. We have about 100, I'll call it about 190 records that we're considering as candidates right now. So it's going to be a pretty exhaustive process and a race to the finish line to get this document approved. But wanted to walk you all through how we're considering projects and what you're going to see when that draft cost feasible plan comes to you next month. And then you'll be starting to take action on that in September when this committee re-meets. So that concludes the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Staff, any public comments?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any committee comments, questions, discussion? Okay, seeing none.
Well,
Thank
if
you.
not, I encourage if anybody has reflections after today's meeting, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll be happy to speak with anybody, this committee or any of your staff as we work towards developing that draft cost feasible. Thanks for your time.
Item 3C, Vision Zero Action Plan 2023-2024 Progress Report. At this time, I'd like to invite Valentina, nice to see you, to present this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Valentina Facus. I'm the pedestrian bicycle coordinator here for the Palm Beach TPA. And for today's presentation, I will be going through our progress for our Vision Zero action plan for the years of 2023 to 2024. And just to let everyone know, this progress report is already included in today's backup agenda. And you can also find it on our website at palmbeachtpa.org/Vision Zero. So if you are not familiar with our plan, the TPA did adopt a Vision Zero action plan back in 2019, and then we updated it back in 2021 with the goal of eliminating all of our traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries. So within this plan, we do have some strategies and actions related to policy, funding, and culture to get us closer to accomplishing our Vision Zero goal. And you have not read this plan already, you can do so by scanning the QR code that's displayed on the screen, or you can visit our website at palmbeachtpa.org/Vision Zero. So on the screen before you are all of the actions that we have completed to date. So the very first one is to produce a Vision Zero progress report, which is what I am presenting to you all today. Those are all of the actions that we have achieved to date and also are in progress. So I'll be going over the actions that we have in progress in the next slide. And we typically produce this report every year during the month of June. The next action is safety changes in TPA legislation and policy positions. The TPA is an active member of the Florida Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council, also known as the MPOAC, and the TPA does attend these MPOAC meetings on a quarterly basis to provide input for legislation and policy positions. So we provide our input in that way. Next is the TPA does work with the signal maintaining agencies for safety improvements. And one example that I will provide for this is that we received a public comment to install leading pedestrian intervals at the Southern Boulevard and Parker Avenue intersection in the city of West Palm Beach. So the TPA did work collaboratively with with Palm Beach County to install this leading pedestrian interval, and it is now active. So if you have never seen a leading pedestrian interval and how that functions, you can do so by going to that intersection. The next action is to provide reviews of fatal pedestrian and bicycle crash reports. As you all may be aware, the TPA does provide these crash reports on a quarterly basis. We first began this effort back in 2021. And originally, when we first began the effort, we were only analyzing fatalities for pedestrian and bicyclists. But in an effort to better align with our Vision Zero action plan, which calls to eliminate both fatalities and serious injuries, we decided to add in serious injuries into our analysis. So we did that back in 2022, and we have been providing those crash reports every quarter. But now some exciting news with this new fiscal year coming up. We will be moving towards a crash dashboard to display our crash reports. So instead of having those static reports, we will be having a crash dashboard, and it will be public facing. So everyone will have access to this dashboard that will have all of the crash statistics, graphics, and all of that data. The next action is to host annual Vision Zero workshop. If you had the chance to attend, we had our Vision Zero workshop back in April 4th of this year. We hosted a Safe Streets and Roads for All workshop in an effort to gather all of the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant awardees and all of the potential applicants to share their lessons learned and how we can all work collaboratively. On the photo that I have on the slide there, I'm showing a picture of our partners that also had the opportunity to share their lessons learned. So Broward and Miami-Dade County, they attended, they shared their lessons learned. So it was a really good opportunity for all of us to collaborate. The next action is to host and participate in Vision Zero safety events. So the TPA does attend and participate in various safety events throughout the year. One example that I will provide is I am actually showing a picture on the bottom left hand corner. The TPA did attend and collaborate with the Lake Worth Beach CRA, Safe Kids Palm Beach County, and FDOT to provide a bicycle safety event and provide free bicycle helmets to a traditionally underserved community in the city of Lake Worth Beach. So we did that back in March in honor of Florida Bicycle Month. Now I am showing all of the actions that we currently have in progress. So the very first one, which is really exciting, the TPA is working on a speed management study in an effort to complete that action 1.3, which is the target speed for high crash corridors. And you all will be seeing a presentation on that for our September committee meetings. And really the speed management study, the purpose of this is to identify the appropriate target speeds for all of our high injury network roads and come up with strategies and countermeasures. The next action is to display safety analysis for TIP projects. We are actively working on this, and we're looking to potentially have a consultant help us with this effort in this upcoming fiscal year. The next action is to work with the school district to update transportation curriculum. We actively work with the school district for this effort. And the TPA does attend the back to school events that the school district hosts every year during the month of August to provide those pedestrian and bicycle curriculums to the physical education teachers that attend those back to school trainings. The next action is to evaluate TPA funded projects. So as you all know, the TPA does have funding programs. So really the purpose of this action is to evaluate all of the projects that were completed through our funding programs and see if there has been any crash reductions, any health benefits, or any economical benefits. The next action is to include typical section attributes in the federal aid eligible roads. We are actively working on this action and we are looking to get a consultant to help us with this effort as well. And last but not least is action 3.3, which is to implement the Vision Zero media and public education campaign. So on the right-hand corner, you'll see a screenshot of our Vision Zero social media toolkit that we did publish back in 2022. I do encourage everyone to use this resource. We have this resource for all of you. We do have some speaking points in that Vision Zero social media toolkit that you can use in the case that you get asked about Vision Zero and you're not sure what to say. We also have some sample press release media that you can use for the media. And we have a pledge to say crash and not accident. And really the purpose of this pledge, which I'm sure most of you have seen it already and have taken the pledge. If you have not, we encourage you to take it. Really the purpose of this pledge is to change the culture, to try and change the culture of how we describe the collisions. So unfortunately, our existing culture is we are describing crashes as accidents. And when we describe a collision as an accident is implying that a collision is inevitable or nothing could have been done to theavoid it. So when we change our culture and we use the term of crash, we are alluding that there's human behavior involved in the current existing infrastructure and the existing policies in place where we can help address roadway safety and save lives. So next steps for this, we will actually be going through the process of updating our Vision Zero action plan in this new fiscal year. So be on the lookout for that. As I mentioned, we will be creating a crash dashboard moving forward. So be on the lookout for that as well. And we, for our Vision Zero Advisory Committee, tomorrow we will be starting a grant coordination for the Safe Streets and Roads for All, which actually the Village of Wellington has volunteered to do a presentation on their progress for their Vision Zero action plan. And we will be asking other municipalities in the county as well to provide their update on how their Vision Zero action progress is going. So with that, I can take any questions. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Steph, are there any public comments or questions? Okay.
No, Madam Chair.
Any comments or questions from committee members? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Next items are administrative items for information only. They are items 4A through C. There will be no staff presentation unless requested by a committee member. Is there a request to hear any of the presentations? No. Okay. Our next tech meeting will be September 4th, 2024. At this time, our committee meeting is adjourned.